All right, so the goal of this video is to show you how to add a few dimensions to a technical drawing. The dimensions that we're going to add, I have this rough sketch here that shows some of the dimensions. I am not going to add all of these, but I am going to add a couple offset to the side here, so these ones over here. And I am also going to show how to dimension, oh, I don't even have it on here, how to dimension a hole with a leader. So this would be 5x diameter 0.62. Is this bleeding through? No, it's not. Good. Okay. I'm going to add that. We're going to add these because I just want to show how to add those. Oh, and we will also add the angle down here. So those are the dimensions that are going to be added. And I'm doing this as a reference so people can see how some different kinds of dimensions may be added to a drawing. So ideally, when we are adding dimensions, we want to use a 2H pencil. That will be the best kind of pencil for giving us the kind of lines that we want. The order that we want to do this in is we always want to add the extension lines first. So we could go through here and add all the extension lines, but I'm just going to add the extension lines for the dimensions that I am showing here. So I will start with these linear dimensions, which are off to the side here. I'm just going to extend some of these center marks here so that they are a bit longer. I have to move this a tiny bit, and hopefully things don't fall over on me here. There we go. Should be a little better. Okay, so I'm extending this line so that I have a little more visibility with it. I'm going to add an extension line up here. I've already kind of got the start of it coming off of the center of that circle. And you can always shorten the extension lines later, so it's okay to draw them as long as you need. And in those cases, those were two center lines, so I am already going to have a bit of a gap in here that I can clean up later. But this one down here is not, it's not going to be touching that line. You always want to make sure your extension lines have a bit of a gap. So I'm not starting here, I'm starting back a bit. So I'm going to draw my extension line out. Let's also add an extension line for a 45-degree angle, which I'm going to do off the left of this here. I only need one extension line because I'll sweep the dimension lines later. So we'll extend that off. And I'm also going to add some extension lines here for this leader. So we will have this coming down at an angle, and the leaders always point to the center of a circle. So I'll do it on this side so it's a little more visible. I'm pointing this through the center at about 45 degrees. If you'd really like to be really neat about it, you can actually get your triangle in here and go like this. And you want to start it on the outside of the circle, bring it out and away a good distance, and then you'll be able to draw another horizontal line in there, and of course clean up any parts of that line that you do not want. So that gives us some of our key marks here. Let's see, are there any other ones that I need? Nope. So that there is the first step. The next step now is to step off our actual dimension lines. And our dimension lines are the ones that actually will have the arrows on them eventually, but we're going to add the arrows last. If we remember, we want to step off our dimension lines about 3/8 of an inch away from the object. And I have scratched into my triangle here a line that is 3/8 of an inch away from the side. I scratched it using my compass, and I scratched it by holding it up to my 3/8 inch acrylic on the side of the wooden T-square. So you can use all these tools so that you don't have to repeatedly measure. You can just line it up so that that line is right on the edge of the object. And I'm going to draw one dimension line in here lightly. And then I'm going to move this until this line is on top of that other dimension line right there. Line it up just right. Draw another mark. And this will space out the two smaller dimensions that go on the inside and the larger dimension that goes on the outside. Larger dimension should always go on the outside. And let's see, do I need to do that over here? No, we'll just do the 45-degree angle in there. All right, so the next step here is to add all of the dimension figures. Of course, I need some 1/8-inch guidelines. What you can do, again, to save yourself the trouble of repeatedly using a scale, is you can actually just go on a sheet of paper and mark for yourself. Well, I'll do it on something else so I don't accidentally mark on my drawing. Mark for yourself a couple 1/8-inch marks right on the edge of a piece of paper, and then 1/8 inch, 1/8 inch, 1/8 inch. Oop, that one was a little crooked. And then you can use this to create your guidelines on a piece of paper without moving a scale around all the time. So let's see, I'm going to put one of my dimensions right about here. So I'm going to put a dot and a dot. I'll put another one right about here, a dot and a dot. And then I'll put this larger one right around there somewhere. And I will throw some guidelines in here, light guidelines that I can write inside of. I'll do the same thing over here, and I'm going to make sure this one's nice and centered right on that leader, so I'm writing right next to it. Guideline, guideline. And I should have actually done this beforehand, but I'm going to sneak in here with a compass now, and we're going to add a sweep to get our 45-degree dimension lines here. So that is going to be centered right on the spot where you're pivoting. And the length of this doesn't necessarily matter. You probably don't want to do it way out here. You don't want to do it too close. You could measure, if you wanted to be safe, maybe an inch or so away. But this is something where you just kind of have to look and say, is it going to look good or is it going to look bad? I'm going to keep that line light. And now here, of course, I'm going to mark again because I'm going to put my 45 dimension in there. So I'll throw some dimension lines on there. And now I have all my spots where I can write the dimensions. So I'm just going to letter them in here. So this one is 2.12. And we're going to darken the dimensions lines later, so you'll see how this becomes a little more bold. 2.12. These were, and I'm reading off my sheet over here. So this one was 4.88. Keeping it right inside those guidelines. Down here we're going to have 45 degrees. And up here we have the 5x diameter is 0.62. Okay, and now our last step is really just to darken in the extension lines, dimension lines, and then to add some arrows. So I'm going to make these a little darker. You don't actually want extension lines and dimension lines to be super duper dark. They should actually be fairly light and sharp. So I'm actually going to sharpen my pencil here for a second. Make sure we get some nice sharp lines with that 2H pencil. I'm going to darken my sweep there for the angle. And you're going to notice I'm not going to run over the numbers. Ew, my pencil compass is dull. So I should sharpen that. That would be something to do here. I'm not going to run over the numbers when I'm darkening these lines, so that's going to give me some better lines. And you want to extend your extension lines about 1/4 of an inch or so past the edge of the dimension line, which again is the one that runs with the arrows. Same deal with center lines here. So this one, of course, is not going to pierce the outer dimension. It's going to stop a little ways beyond it. These ones will extend from here, the center line out, and stop about there maybe. And darken the leader over here. I I shouldn't be brushing it with my hand. I could be smudging it. This paper already got dirty anyways because it was sitting on my drawing board and I put stuff on it a whole bunch of times. I'll darken these while I'm here too, even though I'm not doing all of them. So you see I've already added these arrows to these. And notice these also are not touching the object themselves. There's a tiny little gap right in there. So, and finally, let's come in here again with our triangle and get some nice dimension lines. These you can run right through the extension line, but stop when you get to the number to leave a nice clear gap. And we'll draw down there. And we'll do the same over here. Stop at the number, skip it, get on down to that extension line. And now you've got some dimension lines in there. And of course, the final step here is to just add some arrows. We may later also want to come through and just clean up these light construction lines that are on the side. My eraser has been misbehaving and leaving nasty smudges on the page, which is not something that normally happens, but for the arrows, you want to make sure your arrows are long and thin. Okay, the best way to do it is to start with your pencil point up here at the top and to pull back and away. So this takes practice. It can actually be, in my opinion, but I'm a big nerd, quite fun to just practice drawing arrows in another class or something like that if you are looking for something to doodle and do. Be careful, because if you misplace an arrow, arrowheads are very dark and very difficult to erase typically. They should be dark, and so you want to make sure you're definitely only putting them in the right spot. You do not want to accidentally put them in a spot where you don't intend for them to be. We'll draw an arrow coming off of our leader as well. You can see my arrows over here. In fact, I'm going to darken these dimension lines up here too, just for a little clarity. Make them a little darker and sharper, and I'll draw over them with new arrows. There we go. And that makes this a bit clearer. And so, just as some things not to do, okay, when you're drawing an arrow, like I said, long and thin. So this is good, long and thin, okay? Because if you go and you make big crow-footed arrows, we call them crow-footed arrows because it looks like a crow's foot, this can be extremely distracting and can really detract from the actual object lines that are there. And it's not about the dimensions, it's about the object. The dimensions just tell you what the object is. So long and thin. You also want to avoid things like that. You want to make sure that, when you're pulling these back, you want them, this would be a good one, this would be a good one, okay? So you don't want them to be like these spindly things. You don't want them to be super wide. You don't want them to be these big, ugly, dark arrows that does not do a good job of communicating. So that is how you place dimensions on a drawing. Of course, this drawing is not finished at all. I would need to add the the dimensions up here, this radius. I've already got these over here. So that's why it's always good to do a sketch, just a quick sketch to show yourself where you're going to have the drawings, because you can sort of check them off as you add them. So that would be my strong recommendation. This is not something you turn in. This is what you turn in. This does not have to be pretty. It just has to show you where all the dimensions are, and it helps you pre-think. And eventually we're going to get into some drawings that do not require you, or that do not give you the dimensions ahead of time, so you will not have any dimensions available for you to see, and you will just have to make up those dimensions on your own. So in those situations, it's going to be more challenging, and you're going to want to be able to pre-decide what everything looks like so that you can produce a good drawing. So I hope that this helps some people to add some dimensions if you miss my demo in class, or if you just need more help.